All right.
Welcome to the Noonish Devotional.
Hello, welcome.
Hello to all
Welcome.
joining us on Facebook.
Facebook land. So we have finally come to the end of this series on the miracles of Jesus. We had a couple weeks there where we took a break and pushed out some of our discussions, and Betzy and Chuck have carried the discussion on a couple weeks that I wasn't able to be there. And now we're at the end of this series. So thank you all for joining in for our discussions on the miracles of Jesus. And just a heads up going forward, we're going to take a couple weeks break after this week, and then we're jumping back into a new series for Advent. We'll be sending information out about that, but we'll start up again with the same people, same time, same place. So take a respite with us for a couple weeks and join us again for our Advent series, which is a poetry Advent series based on the poetry of Maya Angelou. So it's going to be interesting and fun and creative, and I'm excited about it. So
It sounds like something Gretchen, that sounds like an idea Gretchen would have.
Right, yeah, it's actually a series that Rachel found, but when she sent it to Gretchen, Gretchen was like, oh, heck yeah, all about this. So we're excited about that, but let's go ahead and start with the preamble. I'm going to go ahead and recite it the best I can. I don't have it in front of me, but we're just going to run with it. So
Okay.
Let's go for it. We at Oak Lawn believe that everyone deserves. Oh, I messed it up. We at Oak Lawn UMC believe that everyone deserves to be loved, heard, affirmed, and respected. Chuck, why don't you do the next part?
We at Oak Lawn UMC believe that we can do this when we listen, learn, appreciate diversity in all its forms, and love God above all else, and our neighbor as ourselves.
Betzy, you want to do the last part?
No, I'll skip. I know in Spanish, so
I'll pass.
We believe that as individual parts of the church, we can move towards this corporate reality so that the church can be a voice for the voiceless, a home for the wanderer, a respite for the weary, a balm for the hurting, God's presence in the world.
Amen. All right. Thanks, Chuck.
I know, amen.
Amen. All right. So this
Notice I
last
did not
miracle.
cut my eyes away from the screen.
You say that again?
I did not cut my eyes away from the screen.
That's right. I noticed that. You didn't look at it. You didn't cheat at all. All right. So let's go on to our discussion now. We're talking about Lazarus today, the resurrection of Lazarus. And this is the last miracle in the book, Chuck, in your book. And you talk about in the beginning of the book that it's not a miracle referenced in any other of the Gospels. So,
right.
But it's referenced twice in John, right? Did you say that? Oh,
there's something. I mentioned there's something twice in John. What was it that I said? Oh, no, it appears twice in the lectionary cycle.
Twice in the lectionary cycle. That's what it was.
Twice in the lectionary cycle.
And this is one of my favorite miracles because, I mean, I think it demonstrates a really complex Jesus, a really complex problem, and a kind of a funny response. When I was looking at the different translations, you know that I've been a big fan of the Message this year, and the Message gives a really funny kind of mummy view of Lazarus being wrapped up. It's quite comical the way they speak about this, bound and wrapped person coming out with a handkerchief over his face, and it just really made it real.
Okay, now
but you're gonna look it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'd be nice to hear it again. I'm kind of curious though for each of you. There were definitely some things that stood out for me that were relevant to what we're all going through right now in the pandemic. Also, just some really kind of fun theological things to play with. But I'm curious for you all, what was something that stood out of this miracle story for you?
For me, it was actually a coincidence that we're talking about, for example, a resurrection, and we're seeing that mummy, for example, example, and we are celebrating. Actually, today starts the celebration of Dia de Muertos.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, today is the day.
Today starts because it is a like a series of different things or things or rituals that the Mexican people actually do to commemorate their heritage or their ancestors. So today is when you lit
We
the
picked a
first
good day for
candle.
this.
What?
We picked a good day for this.
Yeah, I know, right? So it was a good coincidence.
You did that on purpose.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. You're like, okay, well, let's figure it out so it can actually be the day that we speak about Lazarus, the Day of the Dead. So yeah, today we
Which
start.
is funny because we're actually kind of a week off, right? So the week gap actually put us back in line with other things that we didn't plan for, which is kind of funny. I like how that works.
Yeah.
So this made you think, Betzy, of Dia de los Muertos.
Yeah. I mean, we started today. We start remembering the forgotten and deceased souls. This is the day for that specific category. Yeah.
How does
tomorrow, funny enough, is the date of the spirits that died either in an accident or they went to the other world without eating.
Is that their punishment?
No, well, it's not a punishment. It's one of the rituals that we have to do is light a candle and put a piece of bread for them because they went to the other world on an empty stomach. I know it's cute, but
food is such an important part of your culture. I love that. I love that.
It is. Yes. I mean, so important that we added it to this very important ritual of Dia de Muertos.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Another thing that stood out when checking the lecture was the comparison that Chuck's makes on regards to the resurrection of Lazarus versus the resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah, the foreshadowing.
Yes. How we see the that and I'm sorry, I forgot how you guys call it. How you get actually inside of that mummy. That mummy.
The mummy.
The what?
The mummy.
Yeah. How do you call the the wearing of the body?
Corpse.
When you prepare the body.
Huh?
Oh, okay.
So
are you talking about embalming?
Embalming.
So how actually well that's one of the part that is different between Jesus and Lazarus. So that's something that stood out for me.
Yeah, they would have embalmed a body and yeah. Well, one of the points that I make is that really for Lazarus, it's a reanimation. He's not transformed the way a resurrection transforms you. And the grave clothes are one of the evidence. Jesus, the grave clothes are still there. Lazarus, he's wearing the grave clothes.
You want to read us what, did you find the verse in the message?
I did. Then he shouted, "Lazarus, come out." And he came out, a cadaver wrapped from head to toe and with a kerchief over his face. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him loose."
Let him loose. I
One-
love that. That was there was a
Go ahead.
commentary I read that in regards to let him loose said, "Let the living live."
Mhm. Yeah.
And I love that imagery and that directive of let him loose. He's
Mhm.
alive.
Yeah, let him loose from his mummy outfit. It's funny, you know, in at the end of John, when Jesus is raised, the grave clothes are still in the tomb, and that's how you know he's been
Mhm.
resurrected and not reanimated. And so somebody asked me after the service, so what was Jesus wearing when he appeared to Mary Magdalene? If he left his grave clothes in the grave, what was he wearing when he talked to Mary Magdalene? And I said, since the Bible doesn't say, I can't answer that question.
That's a smart answer.
You know,
Well,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Betsy.
Just reflecting a little bit, how many of us will still need to be let loose? You know, because is he said let him loose because he's living. And how many of us are living in quotes, but we're not out there, we're not really there, we're just we're like zombies, you know,
Mhm.
not really living life fullest.
So quality existing, but not.
Well, that was actually one of the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in
One of the questions I had for.
Yeah, in the Gospel of John, the word for life means quality of life as well as just keeping your heart beating. It's abundant. Jesus said, "I come that you can have abundant life."
Mhm.
So life in John is a life of joy, a life of love, and not just that your lungs are still taking in air.
Well, and Chuck, you talk about in the book the opportunity for a second life that we see in Lazarus.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me wonder what, in response to Betzy, sorry, I cut out there for a second, I lost connection. In response to Betsy's question of, you know, are we living as a zombie? What would you all do if you were given a second life like Lazarus that you're not doing right now?
If I died and came back right at my age and the whole,
Yeah.
I think I probably appreciate things more.
That's it? You wouldn't like skydive or anything?
I did that already.
Oh, Betsy.
I think it would give me a whole new perspective. You know, that I would realize life is a gift. This life that we have is a gift. And yeah, I might take more chances. I might realize, well, you know, I'm going to die again someday. Now, as I say in the book, we never hear from Lazarus. Chapter 11 or chapter 12. Don't you know a reporter would want to stick a microphone in his face? So what was it like being dead for 4 days?
Right.
What was that experience like? Did you see anything? But we never hear what happens to him in those 4 days, where he was. He's never interviewed. He never says a single word in the entire gospel. And he's the person you'd most want to hear from. That's why I say that the passage is really more about, rather than our own death, it's about losing the people we love. Because you hear from Mary and Martha, you get their response. They speak. Lazarus doesn't speak. So the emphasis in the passage is on losing people we love, not on our own death.
Do you really think so? Because I really resonated with the tensions of Mary and Martha feeling, you don't hear this from Mary, but you hear it from Martha, almost kind of a passive blaming of Jesus. Why didn't you come earlier? You could have
Could
prevented
have saved
this.
him, yeah.
And the waiting, that period of waiting, which, we've lost people as a community in this time of waiting to go back to normal.
Right.
And that was a tension that stood out to me so strongly in this that I don't think I've noticed before.
Losing people. Well, see, that's what I mean. It's the emphasis in the passage is on our response to the people we lose and not on reflecting on our own life. And yeah, we have lost people right before All Saints Day. All right before All Saints Sunday.
Yeah, and then again, we lose people, but our perspective.
And so, what do you
on our own grief, or loss? We have this way of thinking that we know that they're in a better place, right? So whenever we grieve them, is because we are hurting, because we're not going to see them. It's
right.
not because we think that they're in a bad place. It's because we hurt of or loneliness, because they're
it
not
affects us.
part of our life anymore.
Yeah. Well, you see three responses of grief in the passage: Jesus, Mary, and Martha. So I think it's more about our own grief over the people we lose than it is about reflecting on our own life and death.
Yeah, because even if Jesus knew that he was sleeping, but then when he encountered Martha, he got involved in this grief as well, even though he knew he was sleeping.
Right. Jesus knew he was going to raise him, but he's so grieved. Yeah.
Do you think he did?
Huh? It doesn't.
Do you
say,
think Jesus knew that?
It doesn't say explicitly, but the fact that he delays going suggests that he knew that he's going to be able to do that. That he didn't rush right there.
Well, there's also this moment of kind of, and you write about this, of Jesus seemingly unaffected by the news of his death, of Lazarus's death, but then getting there and not only seeing Mary and Martha weeping, but the Jews that come on behalf of Lazarus or whoever are accompanying Mary and Martha are also crying, and then all of a sudden Jesus weeps.
Starts crying.
Just like, two women followed by a group of people, followed by an emotional response, followed by
and then again,
almost, the other part of it is almost a rebuke to Martha of, your theology is great, but maybe your faith isn't where I need it to be.
But then, emotions are such a strong energy that even if we're I'm not sure if you guys have been in situations where perhaps you don't know the person, but because you are in a situation, or let's say in a funeral where there's a lot of people feeling the same emotion, you get drawn into that emotion as well.
Yeah.
You feel it inside of you. So perhaps that was what Jesus was experiencing.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of Sodom and Gomorrah.
You're going to have to unpack that.
The anger?
Well, so it's Abraham, right, that says, surely you won't destroy.
Oh, yeah.
And that whole passage starts with God saying, I'm going to do a thing. I'm not going to tell Abraham about it. And then he tells Abraham about it, and he doesn't do the thing.
Yeah.
So there is a sense in that passage of a God that might change God's mind, which I wondered if in that moment, if Jesus didn't, not for any reasons of cruelty or being mean, but just didn't have the intention of raising Lazarus until he responded to the, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it doesn't say, but the fact that he delays in going, and he says he's only sleeping. So, no, does he say that? Wait a minute. Am I getting
Yeah, no, he does.
Yeah, when he's talking to the disciples, he's like, yeah, well, Lazarus is sleeping. And then when he tries to, pressure them to going, they're like, but why? I mean, and he's like, well, because he is dead.
Oh, yeah, he's fallen asleep. Yeah. So you think Jesus knows that that's what he's going to do.
Is falling asleep though in the Greek? I mean, is that a literal translation, or is that? I feel like Dr. Clark Souls used to talk about that a lot in terms of that being kind of a idiom for death.
A euphemism, yeah.
And so it would maybe that would make a difference if Jesus is saying, yeah, he's taking a nap versus no, he's passed into a state of.
He says, I'm going there to awaken him.
Oh.
I'm going there to awaken him.
So that was his original plan then.
Did he not know that Lazarus was dead then until he got there?
Yeah, I imagine that he did know. In the Gospel of John, Jesus knows things that he shouldn't know by just his senses. He knows things. He knows people. He knows things.
You never really, which is so funny because I think what I want is a Jesus that explains.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't come earlier because I knew he was going to die, and then I knew I was going to bring him back. So it's okay, Martha. Don't stop crying.
Yeah.
We don't get that.
Yeah. I was going to say a minute ago, I allude in the chapter, I think, to preaching funerals for two babies.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know the family. I'd never met either of the babies. I'd never held either of the babies. But watching the family, I got caught up in their emotion. It was hard for me to get through the funeral. I had a very hard time getting through that funeral, both of them, because watching them grieve. So I don't know if Jesus watching Mary and Martha grieve got to him. It's a curious passage, but Jesus in the Gospel of John is more sort of otherworldly than he is in the other Gospels. He's in the Gospel of John. There's no crying. There's no sweat like drops of blood or anything like that. He doesn't anguish over his crucifixion. He doesn't pray, take this cup away from me, anything like that. But here he shows this humanity of crying. So it's a interesting little slice there that John gives us of Jesus' humanity. We usually sort of above the fray in the Gospel of John.
Right. And it also, I think, we want to make sense of it by saying that because of his emotion, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe not all of us, but I know that his emotional response helps me connect with why he would raise somebody from the dead, but perhaps they're not related.
Right. I don't know.
Betzy, what would you do if you were given a second life? You were given a Lazarus life.
I think now being in this journey of consciousness that I started 2 years ago, I'm seeing life very differently. And I'm going more with my instinct rather than with my rational mind. So perhaps doing the things that I really want versus the things that I feel obligated to do. So I guess I'm living my life as Lazarus.
You're living your Lazarus life right now.
A second chance.
Yes. Yeah, because it's now having this awareness, I I feel more compelled to be more spiritual, to learn more about God,
Hmm.
to be involved more in church, and obviously, I mean, having still my responsibilities and everything, but I do feel more drawn into studying more of God's word,
Hmm.
and,
Hmm.
meditating more, and going to retreats to feel my spirit,
Hmm.
things that I wouldn't do before. And this is
Hmm.
because, I mean, I'm craving God's uh message more in my life.
That actually leads me to another question that arose for me from this text. The Chuck, you talk about how his opponents, Christ's opponents, don't, and this is not just in John, but it seems to happen repeatedly, that whatever Jesus does that's good doesn't necessarily win over his opponents.
No.
Like it usually
Yeah.
makes them more mad, or usually makes them more hostile towards him. And Jesus does at one point warn about, I think he refers to the evil generation that needs signs and wonders. And so this is a pretty big theological move to raise somebody from the dead. And
Right.
it's so clearly foreshadowing Christ's death and resurrection, which I am also curious to talk about what the difference is between these two deaths and resurrections, because I think that's pretty big theologically too. But if we're not to rely on signs and wonders, what is it that compels us to follow Jesus?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
again, Mara, we see resurrections in our actual life today.
Mm-hmm.
We and the way that I see a resurrection is, for example, when we see and we see it on Pastor Greg testimonial, going from a completely different life than what he was living before. To me, that's a resurrection. I mean,
Mm,
The
yeah,
Gospel of
because
John would call it a new birth.
exactly.
birth.
New birth. Um,
Yeah, as opposed to like a bodily
yeah.
resurrection
Yeah. Because I
implies
want to be
something
very
coming. Yeah.
careful not to refer to what happens to Lazarus as a resurrection, because he's not
Ooh.
transformed. He's not transformed the way we are in resurrection. He comes back to this life. He's reanimated, but I don't think he's
Re.
resurrected.
Hmm. But Jesus is resurrected.
Jesus is resurrected, right?
Okay. And we will be resurrected at
And
the
we will
end
be
of time.
resurrected. That's
But
key to my
Lazarus
faith,
was revived
right? Key to
or
my faith.
reanimated.
We're not reanimated after this life. We're resurrected after this life.
Right. Right.
Lazarus is
Interesting.
reanimated.
What's the difference to you?
Well, Lazarus will eventually grow old and die again. I mean, he gets a second chance at this life. But
Mhm.
he's the same person. He's living the same life. He's still susceptible to disease and death and all like that. The resurrection, we're transformed. We're ourselves. We're not ourselves. We're a transformed version of ourselves, and we don't
Mhm.
die again.
So then, the resurrection of Jesus meant something more than just a body overcoming death.
Right.
You want to give
See,
us the spark notes on this
he could walk
systematic
through
theology?
walls. You get to the Gospel of John, he could walk through walls. He could walk through locked doors.
That's true. That's always tickled me in terms of when we pass the peace,
Yeah.
and where that comes from in the story is Jesus just kind of appearing in the upper room,
Yeah.
and like, I imagine startling the crap out of everybody.
All right. He can stand on the floor, but he can also walk through walls.
Right. So then there's a flesh this out more for us, Professor.
Okay. Flesh out how you walk
There,
through walls.
Yeah, I did not mean that as a pun, but that's kind of a funny
Okay,
pun.
yeah.
Flesh out the resurrection for us more, because
Yeah,
it's more than just body, right? I mean, one
yeah,
of the notes
yeah.
I made in reading your book is how funny that at face value, this is the same thing that happens to Jesus, but we know theologically it's not.
Right.
So what is it that happens to Jesus that is different, that implies something different for us
Mm-hmm.
in this lifetime, or not? Is it not in this lifetime? Is Lazarus a promise for this lifetime and Jesus is a promise for the next one?
Yeah, that's a good question. What Lazarus does for us is show Jesus' power over death. That uh, Lazarus' death is not in this life the final word. Jesus has power even in this life over death. Now, one of the things that the Gospel of John, this is a term Betzy may not be familiar with, a realized eschatology. In other
Yeah.
words, eschatology is the resurrection when we resurrected and we go to be with God, be with Jesus. But the Gospel of John is always clear that abundant life begins now. It's not just something we have to wait for. But could you hear all of that? Were you listening, even though we couldn't see you? Okay.
Yes.
So John is very clear. That's what Jesus says in I think it's verse 25. I am the resurrection and the life. Present tense. I am the resurrection and the life. So Jesus is always talking in present tense about these things. It begins now.
Which is specifically in response to Martha saying, I know we'll be resurrected in the future.
Right.
But if you had come, he would still be alive now.
Right.
And he's saying, no, you don't. Well, I'm adding these words. No, you don't get it, Martha. I am now.
I am the resurrection and the life. Right. It's now. It begins now. So.
But by what you just said, what Jesus should really say is, I am the reanimation right now. Right?
Well, yes, but the resurrection,
reanimation.
Lazarus's reanimation is an affirmation that God can act now. It's not just waiting for the resurrection. God can act now. God can create and renew now. That's one of the things we talked about last night in the Julian Way.
Yeah, heard that was a good study.
Did you hear a recording of it? Did you see the recording?
No, I haven't, but Ryan caught us up a little bit at Coffee with Pastors.
Oh, okay. So you see my Academy Award performance as the servant.
He said you were quite entertaining. You had to reenact something.
What's that?
You had to reenact something.
Yeah, I had to reenact this parable from Julian of Norwich. Yeah, and I was the servant, and Ryan was the Lord. And but anyway, we talked about 1 Corinthians 15, where where Paul says we get a spiritual body. So, and then talked about planting a seed where the seed is planted, and that a seed and a plant are two different things. A seed doesn't go into a giant seed, it goes into a tree, so it's transformed. It's itself, but it's not itself. It's a transform. It becomes something else. One of the things we use to illustrate the resurrection is a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. The caterpillar is the butterfly, but it's not. It's a transformed caterpillar. So the resurrection, we're transformed.
So we're caterpillars at this moment?
At this point, we're caterpillars. We'll become butterflies. Now, there were certain theologians like Karl Barth who didn't like that, because Karl Barth said that's a natural process, caterpillar turning into a butterfly. But it's an illustration. It's a way of looking at it. Barth said that's just a natural process, and the resurrection is something God does. God raises us. It's not inevitable that we be raised. and a caterpillar turning into a butterfly unless something goes wrong. That's just a natural process. God acts to raise us. That's why I call the chapter Interrupting the Interruption.
Right.
It interrupts us, and then God comes along and interrupts the interruption by raising us.
Have you all ever heard of modern day examples of people being raised from the dead?
You mean the near-death experiences where they're out for 30 minutes or so and then they come back? I've read some of those, yeah. I saw the movie, Heaven is Real.
Oh yeah, that movie.
Oh, yeah. Heaven is real. Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I guess.
The people who have a heart attack and then they bring them back with the paddles and they talk about what happened to them while they were gone and they...
Yeah, when I was a little more in some more pure, that's not a good word, more intense charismatic circles, I feel like I heard a lot of stories about people praying over caskets and the caskets opening.
Oh.
And the people. You've never heard any of those?
No. No.
Yeah,
And
they're not stories of churches in the US.
Right. What do you think about those? I mean, I think
pretty wild.
Were those bodies embalmed first, or were the person not really dead?
I didn't ask that question.
I have heard stories about people in the funeral home sitting up straight, or they start crying or something like that, and the funeral home workers realize they're not actually dead. They sneeze or something like that.
Oh dear, that sounds horrific.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think we've talked about this throughout this whole series of what do we actually believe in terms of God's power to manifest physically in our bodies. And do we believe that as a real promise or not? Which I don't know that I'm any further away from what I believed before, which is what I see in Lazarus is God can do anything.
Uh-huh.
And perhaps at this point in history, that anything, I mean, having a baby in your 80s or being raised from the dead are those beyond logic. Sorry if I'm bouncing around a lot. Beyond logic, physical things that God can do in your body. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I want to believe it's possible.
I mean, then again, Jesus is one of Jesus' promises. Your guys are gonna do greater things than I do. So, do we really believe that? If we do, then all things are possible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one to say God can't do anything. I mean, I don't take the Bible literally. I think Jesus did do healings. I think Jesus did heal. The historical Jesus did heal people. I think that's one of the reasons he had such a following. I think he was raised from the dead. I think the tomb was empty. But I've never seen anything to make me think that somebody's actually dead, and or longer than like an hour or so when they raise them back up with the paddles. Those near-death experiences, I've never seen anything where a person's been dead for 2 or 3 days and they come out. I've never seen anything like that. Credible account.
I'll have to find. I mean, at this point, that was probably 10, 15 years ago when I heard stories like that, which now it's so hard to know what to trust in terms of media. Who knows if it's true or not, but
perhaps fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Yeah, it could be.
You would think something like that would make international news if it really happened.
Well, yeah, I guess.
I have heard stories of where somebody's in the funeral home and they sit up, or they cough, or they cry, or something like that, and the funeral home people realize they weren't really dead.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like my worst nightmare.
Right? There's a disease that...
If you worked at a funeral home, or what?
Both.
What happened to you?
Both. Both.
Okay.
If you were the one being rolled into the funeral home and you realize, oh, they think I'm dead.
Well, that's where the phrase "a dead ringer" comes from. Is they used to bury people, and sometimes they would come back to life, and they would pull a string, and it would
Oh,
ring
the
a
bell,
bell.
right?
Oh, right. The bell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a dead ringer.
The dead ringer. Yeah. Yeah. This conversation's taking an interesting turn.
Yeah.
Can we revisit a question I asked earlier in terms of
Sure.
if signs and wonders aren't the thing that draws us to Christ, what is the thing that
Oh,
draws
yeah.
us to Christ? I'm not asking because I'm looking for a specific answer. I'm really curious
Mhm.
in both of your experiences as I was processing, let me finish that word, that question.
Mhm.
I don't know that signs and wonders have ever been the thing that's drawn me to Christ, but what is?
Yeah. I was raised in the church. I mean, I've been in the church since I was a little boy, so it was just sort of a natural progression. I was never apart from the church. Church has always been part of my life. But there came a time when I really consciously chose it for myself, and it was more just seeing. It was more answers to prayers. I prayed about things, and I saw an answer to my prayer, and that helped me believe when I was a teenager, when I was a young teenager, 14, 15.
Mm-hmm.
Answers to prayers. That's what got me started on consciously choosing it for myself, and not just, my parents saying, "Okay, going to church today." It was some things I prayed about and got an answer to the prayer. So now, what keeps me going is belief in the resurrection. I mean, there have been people who've done my level of work and come out as atheists. Bart Ehrman's the most famous example. Came out as skeptics anywhere, or agnostics. I'm not really sure exactly where Bart Ehrman is. He was a fundamentalist and earned a PhD in early Christianity, New Testament and patristics, and then became a skeptic and an agnostic. And what keeps me coming back is belief in the resurrection, believe that Jesus was raised from the dead.
Chuck, let me
Yes.
ask you, what do you think happens to, for example, in that example,
Uh-huh.
what do you think people choose not to believe anymore?
There are a lot of things about the story that sound fantastic to people, and when you get into the higher level of study, you begin to see that you can't take the stories literally. And that freaks some people out. They can't handle it. I mean, to me though, the stories were written because Jesus had such an impact, and that's why they wrote them down. That's why the church got started. And the way I look at it, now, I'm veering away from your question, but the way I look at it, why would people have gone around saying Jesus was raised from the dead if he hadn't been? But the reason some people become skeptics is they see the complexity of it and they can't handle the complexity. They were given simple answers when they were children, and when they study how the Bible was written and how the church got started, it shakes their faith. So, and I mean, I still have questions. I still don't understand everything by a long shot. I don't understand why, if God can make a second creation, a new creation, why God doesn't go ahead and do it now. But anyway, so.
But what if he did?
I'm sorry?
What if he did? What if he already did? But they're in a different planet and we don't see him.
Well, what good does that do us?
Whoa!
How do we get to that planet?
Well, I mean, I believe in a God of possibilities. I believe in a God where we're not his only creation, because he is so almighty and so powerful that he can do whatever he pleases. And probably we're humanity 101. maybe he already created humanity 2.0 and we don't know it yet.
So instead of resurrection, you believe in evolution.
Not really evolution, because evolution will be us.
Are those mutually exclusive?
Good question. If
I don't think they are.
we're simply going to evolve into a higher species, is that the same thing as resurrection?
No, because you
Yes,
just mentioned that resurrection involves not really the physical body, right?
It also requires death.
Yeah.
So
I think
you can't evolve if you're dead.
Uh-huh.
I think our physical body is transformed. I mean, obviously, if somebody's been in the ground for 100 years, their body's decayed. You're not going to use that body, but Paul says we get a spiritual body. So I think embodiment is still a part of who we are in the resurrection.
That is definitely part of my theology, of bodily resurrection. I don't know what that looks like, but it's just something in my credo that I wrote.
Okay.
So
What do you
I'm
mean by
sticking
bodily
to it.
resurrection? What do you mean by that, bodily resurrection?
Well, I actually have been looking at kind of fleshing this out more when talking about, somebody said to me the other day that we are just a spirit in a pile of flesh.
Oh, no, I don't believe that.
Well, I know. And I wanted to argue with that, but I started researching why this kind of dualism, I think is a little, I want to say reductive, but I think it's we are more integrated than that. Like, we're not just a soul in a body,
Right.
or a body with a soul. Like, we are a whole being. And there's something about our physical being that I think we are created in the image and likeness of the Creator. I personally believe that has something to do with why we have 2 arms and 2 legs and teeth, and we digest and we eat and we, so if I believe that is how we were created intentionally, then it would just seem to make sense that when we are recreated or resurrected, it'll be a version of that.
Well, see, in the Gospels, when Jesus is resurrected, he still eats.
Mm-hmm.
He eats.
And he still has his wounds. He still has his wounds.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a physical, I believe in the physicality of resurrection. I don't understand it. Like people at 9/11, that their bodies were so disintegrated, there was nothing left of them. They couldn't find any part of them. And so, it's
or
not.
People that have been cremated.
I'm sorry?
Or people that have been cremated.
Been cremated. It's not this body that were reanimated, but there's a physicality to it. There's a body to it. It just, whatever Paul meant by a spiritual body sounds like an oxymoron, but I think there's a physicality to it.
Now, on some verses, I don't remember which one, it does mention that when Jesus was first seen by Mary, they didn't identify him at the beginning. She didn't
recognize him. Yeah, she didn't recognize him.
So what does that tell us about the physical body? That probably it is the same body, but a little bit different?
Well, same with Road to Emmaus.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and he says, "Don't hold me," because I haven't. She can't touch him. She can't hug him, even though she wants to, because I haven't been ascended to my Father yet. So he was in kind of an intermediate state, but there was still. It was still a physical body that could eat, and he could pass through walls, but he could stand on a floor also. So.
And go through walls.
All right, walk through walls.
I think something that is compelling to me about Christ is my own personal experience with him, which I think is I don't know, maybe sounds kind of not infantile. I don't mean to be derogatory towards myself, but it's very simple. I've never seen anybody raised from the dead. I've never experience anybody completely healed from an illness. A blind man see, a lame man walk.
I've seen.
But at the end of,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, at the end of the day, it's if I go back to those dreams or visions or moments where mystical encounters that I had, I can't deny them.
Yeah. All right. Now you have not answered the question that you asked us. If you were to die and then come back, how would your life be different?
I'd do all the things that I think I can't do now.
You would find a way to do them. You would find a way to do them.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I kind of, maybe I would entertain my wild streak a little more.
So dying.
Like, I did it right the first time. Let's do it
Wilder,
wrong the second time.
Okay.
But in all seriousness, I think I would probably allow myself to have a little more fun.
Okay. What keeps you from doing that now?
Mm-hmm.
Inner judgments on what's right and wrong.
And you think that would be taken away if you died and came back?
Yeah, I think so, because I think I would probably think, well, if I did it right the first time and I came back, then getting it right didn't get me anywhere other than back here. So.
Well, you still have time, right? I mean, you can do it now. You have the
you're young. You can get
yeah.
wild side.
Oh yeah, I know. Ooh,
as
I drop my
church
phone.
Staff retreat and drink wine.
I said we might have drinks and wine.
Oh my.
No, I'm just kidding. There's no shame in drinking wine.
No, there's not.
Yeah, I don't know that it's wild in my definition of the word is probably more like not as structured or not as regimented.
Okay.
So, I don't know, take a road trip without a map or a plan.
You never done that?
No.
Why not?
See, I would love to do that. Is so opposite of Sandra. Sandra would never ever do that. I would love to do that. Take a road trip without a plan.
Yeah.
Just stop wherever I wanted to stop, and Sandra would hate that. She'd never do that.
Yeah.
I would love to do that. Just take off and whatever hotel I found, just stay there that night and decide the next morning where I was going to go. I would love to do that.
Yep. Betsy, how would you answer that question since you've already been skydiving?
Well, I mean, I did answer it. Perhaps I'm your complete opposite, Mara. Because I mean, perhaps I'm not. I have a different kind of judgment that you do. Mm-hmm. And it's very possible. I mean, I judge myself in many ways, and that's something that I'm working on towards.
Yeah.
At the end, judgments are made out of our fears,
Yeah,
not really out of love. Because and if we and this is something that I'm working on, if I'm really want to follow Jesus, and if Jesus is love, is pure love, then who I am to trust more in my fears than to trust God.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
So working towards all that, and I mean, I can tell you one thing: I will never go into a haunted house. That's for sure.
Neither will I. I don't understand the point of those.
Yeah, that's for sure. But going on a road trip without a map, that's for me. That's yeah. I will do it. I think, you know what? I did it this past weekend. I mean, we had to do an errand, but then again, we stayed in a place where we didn't think we were gonna spend the night. We didn't enjoy it. It was awful staying in La Quinta. but Rosa and I were like, it's an experience. We won't do it again. But now we know.
Now you know. Yeah. I like what you said about not he didn't say it exactly like this, but what I resonated with what you said is respond less to fear.
Mhm.
Make less decisions based on fear.
Yeah.
I think you're right. At the end of a judgment for me on my behavior and it's ultimately the fear of doing something wrong or messing something up or breaking something or drinking too much wine, or I don't know, how does this play out in a way that does damage? And I think that is ultimately fear.
Mhm.
So maybe if I were living my Lazarus life, it would be a less fearful life. I could get behind that. For sure.
Is there anything that you could do to get there now without dying and coming back?
Yeah, I'm sure there are. I mean, I think I go through seasons where I'm really good at being in touch with this, and then other seasons where I'm not. And I'm probably need to get myself back to a place where I am a little more intentional and not just kind of, I don't know, not in machine mode or not in autopilot.
Mm.
I have a really good friend who always reminds me that you might think you're smart, but you at your smartest got you to where you are right now. So just remember that there's always more to learn.
Right.
And that to assume that you've got everything you need it's not realistic. And I think that is a really good permission giving of, don't be afraid of not having the answer. Don't be afraid of doing something wrong. There's no possible way you could know everything right now.
Right.
We're always learning. We're always experiencing.
Yeah.
Because we decide to live and let loose.
Yeah. Yeah. But each person's got their own things.
Of course.
And those sometimes the undoing, the unbinding, let him loose, let him live.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's the hard part. We don't hear about that. Mary and Martha unwrapping him. I'm sure they're the ones that did.
What would that be like? Unwrap
What would that be like?
your formerly dead brother from his grave.
Imagine what they think they might have been seeing under there,
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, we are 2 minutes to the end of our session. So Chuck, would you like to pray over us and then we'll call it a day?
And just let me say, I appreciate very much that you used my book for this. I really
Did I use one of your books?
that you used my book for this.
Yeah.
For this
It
study
was such
series.
a joy. I'm so glad you
appreciate it
told me
very
that you
much.
wrote it. Yeah, of course. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for your work and sharing it with us.
Happy to do that. All right.
Yeah.
Let us pray.
Okay.
Most gracious God, we read the story of Lazarus and of Mary and Martha. And we don't quite know what to make of it. We know it promises us the gift of life. It raises questions, what we do with this life that we've been given. We have grief for those that we've lost. We trust you for the resurrection. Help us to grieve in ways that lead to healing and lead to life. Thank you for the study. Thank you for those who joined us. Thank you for this chance to be together. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Did I lose connection? Nope, there I am. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you both
for a minute there, but it looked like you were asleep for a second there.
I did it?
Yeah. All right.
Maybe I was. Maybe I'm in my Lazarus life right now.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Okay.
Thank you both for your commitment to this and your time. Love you both.
Love you both.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.